Hi there. For the APCM for this year, thinking about 2022, I was asked to deliver the report on the finance. I think it was considered that if the finance team could help me understand the accounts, so that I could then deliver a report, well, then anybody could understand the accounts. Not sure I come off all that well in the scenario, but there we are. I think they're probably right. So here are the accounts for St Leonards for January to December 2022, with a little bit at the end of looking ahead. The income for St Leonards last year was £175,729. The vast majority came from Your Giving and gift aid reclaimed on Your Giving, so the blue and orange segments. The remainder comes from wedding and funeral fees, churchyard memorial fees, hire fees and interest. That means 89 pence of every pound comes from the church family. So a huge, huge thank you to all of you for your incredible generosity. In comparison to the income in the previous year, there was little change, as you can see on this slide. But with some church family members who have died and others who have moved away, Mike is estimating that giving will be down by about £8,000 in this current financial year, 2023. That's a cautious estimate, but it's definitely something that we need to note as a church family. For church expenditure, that stood at £161,000 622. And the largest chunk is, as you see, for our parish share that we send to the diocese. We're going to have more on that in a moment, because it's something that sometimes we get a bit confused about. Then things like salaries and property costs and mission giving are the next biggest expenditures. So, the parish share is always worth explaining because it's our biggest outlay. The diocese tells us that 90% of that share comes back to the parish, and that's probably the case, give or take. And the largest proportion of the parish share comes back to us in the incumbent's stipend, pension, accommodation and training cost. And then there's ministerial and parish support, that's the orange. These elements combined account for 80% of the total. And then there's 9% given to mission in the diocese, which we may benefit from. For example, I ran the Bishop's Come and See evangelistic course in the Lent in 2022, and I often use that material for baptism preparation as well. Many of us receive Advent and Lenten devotions by email, that sort of thing. Then the rest is a contribution to the education department in the diocese that supports our church schools. So over at St Peter's, they benefit from that. Things like PACT, which is the programme promoting and supporting adoption. Then a contribution to National Church of England costs, contributing to national training of ordinands. And of course, at the moment, Ollie is training as an ordinand, and in the past few years we've had 2 other people benefiting from this. And lastly, contribution to the administration of the diocese. And here you can see here now how where the diocese receives their funds, and you can see the majority is from the parishes. Comparing our expenditure to 2021, again it's a very similar story to the income in that it's been fairly stable. However, you can see that expenditure in most areas have increased, but this has been offset by a drop in what we're spending out in salaries, because Carmen stepped down from the Children's and Families role at Easter, and Ollie in September from youth work, and we weren't able to replace either in 2022. We tried, we had 2 rounds of interviews, but were unable to fill those positions. So that's why you can see that big difference in salaries. I wanted to give you an idea of what some specific areas of ministry actually cost. So we have a couple of slides on that now. And firstly, for youth work, you see the salary difference massively, because Ollie was seconded to the diocese part-time in 2021, but we still had essentially full-time youth work until September. with Sarah and Johnny filling in the remainder of the time. Then Ollie part-time until December. You can see Children and Families Ministry. You'll notice, again, the same difference. But you'll also notice that the rental of the office comes out of the youth work, or we've lumped that in with the youth work ministry because it was mainly the youth office, but now the Children and Families worker is using it. So you have to split the difference of where we sort of perceive that cost falling, what area of ministry. I also wanted to show you what it costs to keep services going and other aspects of church life, just normal church life. But that also does include weddings and funerals, as funerals and churchyard memorials, they take up a huge amount of Louise's time. Probably about a quarter of Louise's time is spent on weddings and particularly funerals and the churchyard memorials. And you can see the administrator's salary taking up the biggest proportion on this slide. Louise is so valuable in helping run day-to-day things within the life of the church family. Other areas on this slide, you can see what it costs proportionally to hire the office and office supplies. There's IT, there's internet in the office and church. Then there are service and worship resources and things like maintaining the organ, the software for projecting things onto the screen. There's the bread and wine for services. There's also things like Church Suite, the software Church Suite that helps us coordinate all the information properly across the benefice. Then other things, insurance, clergy expenses, cleaning, refreshment and flowers. You can see there was £3,000 more expenditure in 22 compared to 21. Well, this is partly because there were less services because of COVID and very little wine used, for example, in 21. And then in 22, we had expenditures, significant expenditures like the individual communion cups and the trays. So that's where that difference comes from. Heating, a big topic, of course, in the life of our nation, and it's just worth thinking about what it costs to heat the church. And you can see just some events that we've picked out just to give an idea of how much it costs to heat the church in the colder months. Particularly important to think about this for 23 and beyond, because we know for us all energy costs have soared. And here is what we think the energy crisis, how it's going to affect us in this year, in 2023, and it's a significant hike of about £9,000. But amidst all this, we really want to keep moving forward in faith together. A huge part of the PCC's thinking over the past year has been focused on seeing our ministry recover after the disruption of COVID. And one of the things that we keep circling around in our discussions is staffing. It's been so encouraging to see our Children and Families ministry grow in the last few years. And we're intending to extend the Rabia's hours as her circumstances allow for the Children and Families ministry. An additional 4 hours this September, and we would love to extend again in September 24. And you can see the implications financially for that. And then there's the youth work. Margaret and Jonathan have done a fantastic job keeping the youth work going. They're fit to collapse at the moment. And there has been a long history of youth work, employed youth work in the benefice, and particularly at St Leonards. And there's still a feeling we want to continue that and rebuild our youth ministry. And we're going to advertise for this role. We're changing the role slightly to broaden the appeal because of the extreme lack of youth workers who are looking for roles. And we're going to be advertising for a ministry assistant with responsibility for youth work. And we'll see if we get anywhere this term. We're also putting our hat in the ring for a curate in 2024. Well, these latter options, they come with significant price tags, and we're not able, sure we're able to fill the positions advertised, or that the diocese will allocate us a suitable curate. We're somewhat feeling our way, and we would just really ask you to pray for these opportunities and for wisdom for the PCC and the Lord's guidance and provision. Why do we need these staff? Well, the church has had experience of course, employed youth work for many years, and also curates who have all benefited wonderfully the ministry in the parish. They bring fresh energy and fresh perspectives and ideas, and that in turn will enable us to increase our capacity, our contact with the village, and ultimately the impact of our ministry for the glory of Christ. Now, it's unlikely that we can afford all these options, but we're just thinking about what the Lord might want to do amongst us as we seek to serve Christ. We also want to fulfil our responsibility towards our buildings, that they are maintained and developed and fit for use in today's world. A reminder, firstly, of our need to keep up with heating costs. We're also at the moment getting quotes and designs to update the lighting in the church, and we've also had a thorough report on the church hall, and we'll be undertaking some significant maintenance with renovation later this year. These two items, the last two items on this slide, not going to be a drain on the budget, because Mike and the finance team have, on our behalf, built up reserves over a number of years of about £136,000 that you can see there for both buildings, for exactly these kind of projects. And lastly, I return to a note of thanks for all of your generosity towards the work of this church and to our shared mission and ministry. We do face financial challenges. We do in our own lives, and we do in the life of the church. And those challenges are there, particularly if we want to fulfil some of our plans to strengthen our ministry, so that we might ensure the health of the church for the next generation or two. And there may be some ways in which you may be able to help. If you haven't joined the parish giving scheme, that would be a great help. If nothing else, it vastly reduces the administration for Mike and the finance team. Secondly, if you tick the automatic annual inflationary increase, that's also a great help. And I know that many of you have done that. And I also know that that has meant a significant increase this year. So thank you. I realise that not all of us will be able to do that. The cost of living crisis is, as I say, real for us all. It'd be great if you could review annually your giving in respect to changes in your circumstances. And it's worth knowing that small amounts can make a big difference. That roughly £1 a week per adult raises us about 5,200 based on 100 people in our congregation, or adults. I could manage that math quite easily. But I also give advance warning of a gift day. If we make progress with appointing either a youth worker or a curate, it may be that we need to have a gift way, and you could specifically sow into that work on those occasions. It's also worth remembering that St Leonards, you might wish to feature St Leonards in your will, and that can sometimes make a big difference, particularly for one-off projects that you could specify, or for an area of ministry. Sometimes it's helpful if there's not too much specificity, so the PCC can use that money wisely at the time. And Richard has worked on some legacy leaflets, and they are available in church. And lastly, may I invite you to pray. It always seems an impossible task when we look at our finances, but we also know God surprises us with his provision, and he has done that in the past in dramatic ways for St Leonards. And we can pray that he will in the future as we seek to serve him. So thank you for your time. And thank you for your prayers for the ministry of the church. And thank you to our finance team for the care that they show for this area of our church life.